In the closing months of 1939, as Europe slid fully into total war, Britain made a decision that puzzled nearly everyone watching from abroad. The British Army formally approved a new standard infantry rifle Dano for Lee-Enfield. On paper, it looked modernized. In reality, it was still a bolt-action rifle, rooted in a mechanical lineage that stretched back to the late 19th century. Worse still, most British soldiers heading into combat wouldn't even carry this new rifle. Production lag meant the majority would deploy with the older short magazine Lee-Enfield No.1 Mk3, a design already considered outdated by many military observers. Across the English Channel, Germany fielded the Carabiner 98K, shorter, sleeker, and built on the legendary Mauser action. Across the Atlantic, the United States was doing something entirely different. American factories were mass-producing the M1 Garand, the world's first standard-issue semi-automatic service rifle. One pull of the trigger, one shot. 8 rounds, no bolt cycling, no manual effort. Too many modern military thinkers, the contrast was embarrassing. Britain appeared to be marching into the most mechanized war in history, armed with yesterday's technology. Critics were merciless. Military theorists called it a strategic error. Weapons modernizers called it a failure of imagination. Bolt rifles, they argued, belonged behind glass cases and museum plaques, not in the hands of frontline infantry. The future, they insisted, was semi-automatic. Firepower would win wars, not tradition. Britain, it seemed, had chosen tradition. What those critics did not yet understand was that this decision was about to be tested not on paper, but in mud, sand, jungle, and blood, and it would not fail in the way they expected. To be fair, the criticism wasn't foolish. By the 1930s, military planners around the world were reaching the same conclusion. Semi-automatic rifles represented the future of infantry combat. A trained American soldier with an M1 Garand could deliver 40 to 50 aimed rounds per minute. The rifle handled the mechanical labor itself, cycling the action, ejecting the spent casing, chambering the next round. The shooter's job was reduced to trigger control, recoil management, and target acquisition. A bolt-action rifle demanded far more from its user. After every shot came a sequence of movements. Lift the bolt, pull it back, push it forward, lock it down, for deliberate actions, each consuming precious fractions of a second. On paper, the comparison was brutal. The semi-automatic rifle appeared to dominate in every measurable category of firepower. From a purely theoretical standpoint, the contest wasn't even close. The British Army understood this reality perfectly well. Contrary to popular myth, Britain did not ignore semi-automatic development. Between 1930 and 1933, the Small Arms Committee conducted extensive trials evaluating multiple self-loading rifle designs. Among them were the Pedersen rifle, sometimes referred to as the Vickers-Armstrong, Pedersen, and the Danish Bang system. Both were seriously examined. Both ultimately failed. The Pedersen design required lubricated ammunition to function reliably. In a laboratory, this was manageable. In the field amid dust, sand, mud, and grim, it was unacceptable. Lubricated cartridges attracted debris and fouling, turning a theoretical advantage into a liability. The Bang rifle suffered from a different flaw. Its gas-trap system proved mechanically delicate, prone to failure under sustained use. Neither rifle met the standard required for a global war. Technology, however, was only part of the equation. Britain faced constraints that were strategic rather than technical. The entire empire was already standardized around the .303 cartridge. Millions of rifles were in service. Billions of rounds were stockpiled. Factories, tooling, training programs, manuals, everything revolved around the Lee-Enfield system. Switching to a new rifle mid-rearmament risked massive production delays at the very moment Britain could least afford them. So the critics were not entirely wrong. Britain was entering a modern industrialized war with a rifle that appeared outdated. When hostilities began in September 1939, the NOC for Lee-Enfield existed largely as trial models and tooling prototypes. Full-scale production was still ramping up. 3 new factories came online in 1941 to meet wartime demand. Royal Ordnance Factory multi-produced over 700,000 rifles. ROF Fazakerley contributed more than 600,000 BSA. Shirley added another 650,000. But the story didn't end in Britain. North American industries soon outpaced domestic production. Savage Stevens in Massachusetts produced approximately 1.2 million Lee-Enfields under Lend-Lease. Canada's Long Branch arsenal added nearly 1 million more. The rifle Britain supposedly clung to out of conservatism became a transatlantic industrial effort. Yet what critics still fail to grasp was that the Lee-Enfield was not just any bolt-action rifle. It was in fact one of the fastest military bolt-action rifles ever fielded. In the hands of a trained soldier, it could approach semi-automatic rates of fire not through mechanical complexity, but through mechanical elegance. The secret lay in the bolt itself. Most military rifles of the era, including the German K9AK and the American Springfield, used Mauser pattern actions with front-locking lugs. These required a 90-degree bolt rotation. The Lee-Enfield used rear-locking lugs, allowing a much shorter bolt lift, typically around 60 to 70 degrees. That difference might sound minor, but it fundamentally changed how the rifle handled. With a Mauser-type rifle, the shooter's hand must rise high, break the firing grip, and resettle after cycling. With the Lee-Enfield, the movement is compact and fluid, a flick rather than a heave. Tap, pull, push, close. The shooter's cheek remains pressed against the stock. The sight picture stays intact. The Kokon closing system spreads mechanical resistance across the entire cycle, making the action smoother and less fatiguing during sustained fire. A skilled rifleman could work the bolt without losing visual contact with the target, some far more difficult with competing designs unless the shooter had exceptional training. The No-Dot for MKI weighed just under 9 pounds, loaded with a barrel length of just over 25 inches. It fired the .303 British cartridge, launching a 174-grain bullet at roughly 2,440 feet per second. Effective range for aimed fire reached well beyond 500 yards, with sights graduated far beyond typical combat distances for training and volley fire doctrine. Then there was the magazine. While most service rifles of the era fed from 5-round internal magazines, the Lee-Enfield carried 10 rounds in a detachable box. In practice, British soldiers reloaded using 2 5-round stripper clips rather than swapping magazines, but the advantage was undeniable. 10 aimed shots before the pause to reload. In combat, that mattered. British training exploited every one of these advantages without mercy. Marksmanship standards were not aspirational, they were enforced. That baseline requirement was 15 aimed rounds per minute at 300 yards. Soldiers who failed to meet it failed qualification. Well-trained troops regularly achieved 20 to 30 aimed rounds per minute under controlled conditions. One of the most famous demonstrations came in 1908, when Sergeant Major Jesse Wallingford placed 36 hits on a 48-inch target at 300 yards in 60 seconds. Wallingford was an elite marksman, an Olympic competitor, and later a sniper instructor. His performance was exceptional, but it demonstrated what the system was capable of in skilled hands. By 1939, the professional soldiers of the British Expeditionary Force, men with years of service, could deliver volumes of accurate fire that shattered assumptions about bolt-action limitations. That capability would be revealed early and brutally. The proving ground arrived not in theory, but in combat. In August 1914, long before the Second World War, the British Expeditionary Force faced German infantry near the Belgian town of Moss. German units advanced in close formations, expecting to overwhelm what they believed was a small, lightly armed force. What they encountered instead was disciplined rifle fire of a kind few had ever seen. British soldiers, positioned along the Manche Canal, opened fire as the Germans advanced. At that distance, it was impossible to miss. Within moments, German ranks. Cliff's engagement lasted less than a minute. When it ended, the entire sections lay motionless in the open. Private Frank Richards later recalled that they dropped half a dozen men before the enemy even realized they were under fire. Corporal John Lucy described the effect as horrifying even to the men delivering it. "The worst marksman could not miss," he wrote, "because the enemy formed a solid mass." German commanders vastly overestimated British automatic firepower, reportedly believing each battalion possessed dozens of machine guns. In reality, most of that fire came from riflemen. While claims that German troops believed they faced machine guns lack definitive primary confirmation, the tactical effect is beyond dispute. British rifle fire achieved results. Normally associated with automatic weapons, the Lee-Enfield had made its reputation. That reputation carried into the Second World War. From the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of Burma, the rifle endured environments that punished equipment without mercy. In North Africa, it functioned reliably in dust and sand. In Burma, it survived humidity, monsoon rain, and constant fouling. One action in May 1945 captured everything the rifle represented. Rifleman Lachiman Gurung of the 8th Gurkha Rifles was defending a forward position when a Japanese grenade destroyed his right hand and blinded his right eye. Refusing evacuation, Gurung continued fighting alone for 4 hours. He worked the bolt with his remaining hand, shouting challenges to draw attackers closer. By dawn, 31 enemy soldiers lay dead. Before his position, he received the Victoria Cross. The sniper variant told a quieter story of excellence. The No for Mk1T was created by selecting standard rifles that demonstrated exceptional accuracy during factory testing. 7 shots within a 5-inch circle, at 200 yards, or roughly 24,000 were produced during the war. They were widely regarded as among the finest sniper rifles of the conflict. Their design's longevity spoke volumes. Converted to 7.6 to NATO as the L42A1, it remained in service into the 1990s. Comparisons with rival weapons only reinforced its reputation. The German Kar 98K was superbly made and inherently accurate, but its 5-round magazine and longer bolt throw limited practical fire rate. As one assessment famously summarized, the Germans built the best target rifle, the British built the best battle rifle, and the Americans built the best hunting rifle. What of the M1 Garand, the rifle critics insisted Britain should have adopted? Britain evaluated it twice, in 1939 and again in 1943. Both times, it declined. Logistics, doctrine, and standardization mattered more than novelty. British infantry sections revolved around the Bren gun as the primary killing power, with riflemen supporting maneuver and fire. Approximately 38,000 Garons reached Britain, largely issued 2 Home Guard units. Commandos used them enthusiastically in jungle fighting, where semi-automatic fire proved valuable. A 1952 operational study later concluded that while experts could fire the Lee-Enfield nearly as fast as a Garand, the Garand was easier to teach. Britain compensated through doctrine rather than technology. Even the enemy recognized the rifle's value. After Dunkirk, German forces captured tens of thousands of Lee-Enfields, issuing them to rear area and occupation units. They were too valuable to discard. The final verdict came through longevity. The Lee-Enfield remained Britain's standard rifle until 1957. Canadian Rangers used it into the 21st century. Police and paramilitary forces in South Asia still rely on it today. Over 17 million were produced, adopted by more than 40 nations. The critics were right about the future. Bolt-action rifles would fade. What they failed to understand was that doctrine, training, and intelligent design could overcome theoretical inferiority. The Lee-Enfield succeeded not because the critics misunderstood progress, but because they underestimated what this rifle could do in the hands of soldiers trained to exploit it.